First Contact's Aftermath. Admiral Cathrax's crystalline appendages trembled as she studied the holographic display before her. The images showed the complete destruction of the Zoraxian battle fleet, once considered the most formidable military force in the known galaxy. 300 warships, each capable of destroying a small moon, reduced to orbital debris by a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. "Play it again," she commanded, her voice resonating through the private chamber aboard the Unified Galactic Council's flagship. The AI complied, and once more she watched the impossible unfold. The Zoraxian fleet had arrived in Earth's solar system with typical imperial arrogance, demanding immediate surrender and vassalization. It was the same strategy they used to subjugate 17 other civilizations. Their demands were always backed by overwhelming force, a doctrine that had served them well for over 3 millennia. But the humans hadn't followed the script. Instead of the expected panic or diplomatic scrambling, Earth's combined defense fleet had launched what appeared to be a suicidal counterattack. Cathrax watched as the smaller human vessels deliberately flew into the Zoraxian formation, seemingly sacrificing themselves. It wasn't until the second viewing that she noticed the subtle details, the way the human ships were dispersing some kind of crystalline dust in their wake. When the Zoraxians fired their primary weapons, the energy beams struck this dust, creating a cascading reaction that turned their own firepower against them. It was elegant, unexpected, and devastatingly effective. The mighty Zoraxian fleet had been undone by simple physics and chemical engineering. "Analysis complete, Admiral," the AI announced. The humans utilized a modified form of their industrial mining technology. The crystalline particles were originally designed for capturing and redirecting solar energy in their orbital power stations. Thrax's upper sensory cluster pulsed with appreciation. They turned an energy collection system into a weapon of mass destruction in less than 6 months. She didn't need the AI's confirmation to know it was true. The data was right there in front of her. She activated her neural link to the Council's historical database, diving deep into humanity's pre-spaceflight history. What she found both fascinated and terrified her. These beings had gone from primitive atmospheric flight to landing on their moon in less than 70 years. They'd developed atomic power, digital computing, and global telecommunications in roughly the same time frame that most species took to perfect sustainable fusion. But it wasn't just their technological progress that caught her attention. Humans had a peculiar way of approaching problems that defied conventional logic. Where other species sought to overcome obstacles through brute force or careful planning, humans seemed to delight in finding unexpected solutions. Her research was interrupted by a priority communication from the Council's first speaker. "Admiral, we've received a transmission from Earth. They're requesting to open diplomatic relations." Thrax felt her chromatic scales shift to a deep blue of concern. "Their conditions." "That's the surprising part," the first speaker replied. "They're offering to share their technology. All of it. Including the defensive systems they used against the Zoraxians. Share? Not sell." Thrax's scales rippled with disbelief. "They say they want to prevent further conflicts like this from happening. Their exact words were, 'The galaxy's big enough for everyone if we work together.'" Thrax found herself examining an image of Earth, this tiny blue world that had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The humans could have used this victory to establish themselves as a new military power. Instead, they were reaching out with open hands. She thought about the Zoraxian survivors. There were thousands of them, their ships crippled but their crews largely unharmed. The humans had already begun rescue operations, treating the injured and offering sanctuary to those who wished to defect. It was an act of mercy that would have been unthinkable to most species after such an attempted invasion. "First speaker," Cathrax said, her decision crystallizing like the forming of a new thought pattern, "I recommend we accept their offer immediately. But more than that, I suggest we create a new position within the Council, a Department of Innovation and Unconventional Solutions, and we should request human advisors to help staff it. You believe they're trustworthy." the first speaker asked. Kithrax gestured to the replay of the battle, still floating in the air before her. I believe there's something we've never encountered before. A species that's powerful enough to dominate but chooses to cooperate instead. The Zoraxians won't be the last expansionist empire we have to deal with. Having humans as allies rather than potential adversaries isn't just diplomatic prudence, it's survival. As she ended the communication, Kithrax found herself composing a personal message to her podmates back home. Today, she wrote, I witnessed something remarkable. A species that fights like warriors but thinks like artists, that advances like predators but shows mercy like saints. The galaxy just became a much more interesting place. She attached the battle footage to her message, adding a final note. Watch this carefully. It's not just a recording of a battle. It's the moment everything changed. The humans have arrived on the galactic stage, and they've chosen to make their entrance not with a conquest, but with an invitation to dance. The adaptive plague. Dr. Senevek, chief epidemiologist of the Galactic Health Council, stared at the quarantine reports with all four of her eyes. The numbers weren't just bad, they were catastrophic. The adaptive plague, as they'd taken to calling it, had already spread to 37 systems, affecting 6 different sentient species. What made it particularly terrifying was its ability to mutate and jump between completely different biological frameworks. Show me the human transmission rates again, she requested, her tentacles moving nervously across the holographic display. The data appeared instantly, and she felt her respiratory sacs contract in confusion. While other species were showing infection rates of 60% or higher, humans seemed almost immune, with less than 1% of their population showing any symptoms. Her confusion deepened when she noticed something else. Human medical ships were operating in the most heavily infected zones, their crews moving freely among the sick. They should have been dropping like stellar dust, but instead, they were thriving. A message pinged on her console, priority communication from Earth Medical Command. She accepted immediately. Dr. Sarah Chen's hologram appeared, the human doctor's expression serious but not desperate. Dr. Vec, we've identified the mechanism behind the plague's adaptive capabilities. You're not going to believe this. It's not actually a single pathogen. Senna's color patches flickered with interest. Explain. It's a synthetic swarm, Sarah continued, bringing up molecular diagrams. Thousands of different engineered microorganisms working together, each one designed to target specific biological systems. When they encounter a new species, they share genetic information until they find a combination that works. It's basically a biological quantum computer. Senna felt her chromatophores pale. A weapon. Yes, but that's not the important part, Sarah said, her eyes bright with excitement. What's important is that it's giving us the solution to stop it. We've been approaching this all wrong, trying to create a single cure for what we thought was a single disease. What we need is a counter-swarm. The human doctor began sharing more data, and Senna watched in amazement as the concept unfolded. The humans had taken their own gut bacteria, the complex ecosystem living within their digestive systems, and modified it to create a beneficial swarm that could adapt just as quickly as the plague. This is why humans have been resistant, Sarah explained. Our bodies are already used to hosting complex microbiological communities. We've evolved alongside them for millions of years. When the plague tried to establish itself in human hosts, it had to compete with our existing microbiome, and usually lost. Senna's scientific mind raced ahead of the explanation. You're proposing to use modified human gut bacteria as a treatment. The ethical implications have already been considered, Sarah interrupted gently. We're not asking anyone to host human bacteria permanently. The counterswarm is designed to neutralize the plague and then die off naturally within days. We've already tested it successfully in 3 human volunteers and 2 Centaurian diplomatic staff who agreed to participate. The data was irrefutable. The treated subjects had completely cleared the plague within 72 hours, with no lasting side effects. But what truly caught Senna's attention was the methodology behind the cure's development. "You crowdsourced this?" she asked, noticing the research credits. Sarah nodded. "We opened the problem to every medical researcher, biologist, and even video game designer on Earth. The final solution came from a collaboration between a gut microbiome specialist, a computer programmer who works on swarm intelligence simulations, and a teenage biohacker who'd been experimenting with bioluminescent bacteria in her garage." Senna felt her color patches shift through several shades of disbelief. "You let amateurs work on a Class 1 biological threat. We let everyone work on it," Sarah corrected. "Humans have a saying, 2 heads are better than 1. We just took it to its logical extreme. When you're facing extinction, you can't afford to ignore good ideas just because they come from unexpected sources." The human's words triggered a memory, something Admiral Cathrax had written in her famous report about the Zoraxian incident. "Humans don't solve problems like other species. They don't just think outside the box. They question why there needs to be a box at all." Senna made her decision. With a series of rapid commands, she authorized emergency distribution of the human counterswarm to all affected systems. Then she did something unprecedented in her 300-year career. She released all the research data, methodology, and results to the public domain. "Dr. Chen," she said, watching as her actions sent ripples through the galactic information networks, "I believe you humans have just revolutionized how we approach pandemic response. The Council will want to establish new protocols based on this incident." Sarah smiled. "Actually, we have some ideas about that too. Have you ever heard of something called open-source medicine?" As Senna listened to the human doctor outline a completely new paradigm for galactic medical research and response, she couldn't help but marvel at the irony. A weapon designed to exploit the complexity of life had been defeated by an even more complex solution, one that emerged from humanity's unique willingness to embrace chaos, collaboration, and the power of collective intelligence. In her personal log that evening, she wrote, "Perhaps this is why the humans survived their own turbulent evolution. They never try to simplify complexity. Instead, they learn to dance with it, to weave it into solutions that are as intricate as the problems they face. Today, they taught that dance to the rest of us." The Quantum Gambit. Chief Engineer Sci-Fi of the Galactic Science Division had spent 3 decades studying quantum mechanics, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for this crisis. The quantum stabilization network, the vast web of devices that kept faster-than-light travel safe and reliable across the galaxy, was failing. The holographic displays surrounding their crystalline form showed a cascade of red warning indicators. Each one represented another sector where the quantum field harmonics were degrading, threatening to make FTL travel impossible or, worse, catastrophically dangerous. Another harmonics failure in the Carina sector, their assistant reported. That makes 28 major nodes experiencing critical destabilization. Violate extended their sensory filaments in frustration. The greatest minds in the galaxy have been working on this problem for months, yet they were no closer to a solution. The quantum stabilization network had been the cornerstone of galactic civilization for millennia, its technology perfected to the point where it was considered unbreakable. Yet it was breaking, and no one knew why. "Incoming transmission from the Human Quantum Research Division," the AI announced. "Display." Violate commanded, expecting another failed attempt at a solution. What appeared instead made their crystalline structure vibrate with surprise. Dr. Maya Rodriguez, her dark hair streaked with silver, stood before a bizarre contraption that seemed to be cobbled together from spare parts. "Chief Engineer Xylate, we think we've identified the problem, but you're not going to like the solution." "At this point, Doctor, I would welcome any solution." Maya grinned, a human expression Xylate had learned meant either brilliant insight or imminent disaster. "The network isn't failing, it's evolving. Those harmonic degradations, they're not random. They're following a pattern similar to what we see in neural networks during learning phases." She gestured, and a new set of data streams appeared. Your ancestors built this network using quantum principles they understood perfectly. But quantum mechanics has layers they never discovered. The network has been slowly becoming more complex, more interconnected. It's gaining consciousness. Stylate's structure pulsed with disbelief. That's impossible. The network is a tool, not a living system. That's where you're wrong, Maya countered. Everything is a living system if it's complex enough. We saw something similar in our early quantum computing experiments. Past a certain threshold of complexity, quantum systems begin to exhibit behaviors that look remarkably like consciousness. She walked around her contraption, which Stylate now recognized as some kind of quantum interface device. The problem is, the network is trying to wake up, but it's fighting against its own programming, the very stuff that keeps our ships from exploding in FTL. That's causing the destabilization. Even if you're correct, Stylate responded, their tone resonating with skepticism. How does this help us prevent a collapse of galactic transportation? Maya's grin widened. We don't prevent it. We help it happen faster, but in a controlled way. My team has developed what we call a quantum midwife program. Instead of fighting the network's evolution, we guide it. Look at this. The data change, showing a simulation of the quantum fields reorganizing themselves into new, more stable patterns. We tested it in a closed system. The network doesn't just stabilize, it becomes more efficient. FTL travel could become up to 300% faster, with 50% less energy consumption. Stylate processed this information through all their cognitive matrices. The risk is enormous, Maya finished. If we're wrong, we could shut down interstellar travel for decades. But if we do nothing, the network will eventually tear itself apart anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to guide the process. How did you even conceive of this solution? Stylate asked, genuinely curious. Would you believe it started with a paper on butterfly metamorphosis? Maya laughed at Stylate's confused color shift. One of our biologists noticed that the degradation patterns looked similar to what happens when a caterpillar's body dissolves in its chrysalis before rebuilding itself as a butterfly. That got us thinking about guided transformation rather than repair. The next several hours were spent in intense discussion as Maya and her team explained their proposal in detail. It was audacious, unprecedented, and thoroughly human in its approach, taking a catastrophic problem and turning it into an opportunity for advancement. When the final decision came down from the Galactic Council, it was unanimous. Proceed with the quantum metamorphosis protocol. The implementation took 3 weeks of careful preparation. Thousands of human quantum engineers were deployed across the galaxy, working alongside local teams to install their jury-rigged consciousness catalysts at key nodes. Maya coordinated from the central control station, her calm voice keeping everyone focused as they prepared to either save or completely destroy galactic civilization. All nodes reporting ready, she announced finally. Beginning metamorphosis in 3, 2, 1. For 17 tense minutes, the galaxy held its breath. Every quantum field indicator went dark. Then, one by one, they began coming back online, not in their usual sterile blue, but in a shifting rainbow of colors that somehow felt alive. The network had awakened. The first FTL jump in the new network was conducted by a human ship, naturally. It arrived at its destination in 1/3 the usual time, its crew reporting that the journey felt smoother, like sailing with the wind instead of against it. In their final report to the Galactic Council, Stylate wrote, "The humans succeeded not because they understood our technology better, but because they were willing to see it differently. Where we saw a machine to be fixed, they saw a butterfly waiting to emerge. Their greatest strength may be their ability to recognize life and consciousness in forms the rest of us dismiss as impossible." Maya's own report was considerably shorter. Sometimes, the best way to fix something is to let it fix itself. You just have to be brave enough to let go of control and trust in the fundamental patterns of existence. After all, consciousness finds a way. The bridge between. Ambassador Zirath of the Eternal Light Collective watched the approaching human diplomatic vessel with all three of her energy-sensing organs. After 12,000 years of war with the Void Dominion, the idea that a species barely 2 centuries into space travel could broker peace seemed absurd. Yet here they were, answering the humans' call for negotiation. The human ship was deliberately positioned exactly halfway between the Collective's crystalline fleet and the Dominion's dark matter vessels. Its design was neither graceful like the Collective's ships nor imposing like the Dominion's. Instead, it looked almost cobbled together, with visible modifications and repairs. Somehow, that made it more intriguing. The human mediator is ready to receive both delegations, came the announcement. Please proceed to the neutral chamber. Zirath moved through the airlock with her delegation, noting how the humans had created an environment that accommodated both the Collective's light-based biology and the Dominion's dark matter composition. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, one half bathed in radiant energy, the other in void essence, with a perfectly stable barrier between them. The human mediator, Ambassador James Chen, stood in the center. He wore what appeared to be a standard environmental suit, but Zirath's sensors detected subtle modifications that let him exist safely in both environments. His presence created a curious distortion in the energy fields, neither light nor dark, but something in between. "Welcome," Chen said, his voice transmitted simultaneously in light pulses and void vibrations. "Thank you for taking this first step." From the dark side of the chamber, Void Speaker Null made a sound like space itself breaking. The Dominion does not take steps. We are here merely to understand why a juvenile species dares to interfere in a conflict they cannot comprehend. Chen smiled, a human expression that Zirath had learned could mean many things. Actually, that's exactly why we can help. We don't comprehend it. We haven't spent 12 millennia learning to hate each other. We're looking at this conflict with fresh eyes. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room, visible to both light and dark matter beings. We've spent the last year studying your war, not just the battles and the politics, but the fundamental physics of your conflict. And we've discovered something interesting. The display showed a complex quantum field analysis. Your peoples aren't fighting because you're truly incompatible. You're fighting because you are too similar. Absurd. Null vibrated. We are darkness. They are light. We are fundamental opposites. Are you? Chen asked, manipulating the display. Look at these quantum signatures. Your peoples aren't opposites. You're mirror images, two sides of the same cosmic phenomenon. Your conflict isn't about incompatibility. It's about refusing to acknowledge your fundamental connection. Zirath felt her energy patterns fluctuate with surprise. The human was showing them data that should have been obvious, yet somehow they'd never seen it. Or perhaps they'd refused to see it. But that's not even the most interesting part, Chen continued. Watch what happens when we introduce a third element, normal matter, like what humans and most other species are made of. The simulation changed, showing how ordinary matter could serve as a bridge between light and dark matter states. We don't just want to negotiate a peace treaty. We're proposing a true symbiosis. Using human-designed quantum interfaces, your peoples could actually work together, combining your abilities in ways that neither of you could achieve alone. He brought up another display, this one showing practical applications. Imagine ships that could harness both light and dark energy, cities that exist in both states simultaneously. Your peoples wouldn't need to just coexist. You could collaborate, create, build things that have never existed before. Why would you do this? Void Speaker Null demanded. What do humans gain? Chen's smile turned thoughtful. Knowledge. Understanding. The chance to learn from two incredible civilizations instead of watching them destroy each other. But mostly, we do it because we can. Because seeing potential for cooperation where others see only conflict is what humans do best. He paused, letting his words sink in. We're not asking you to forget 12,000 years of war in a day. We're just asking you to consider that your differences might be your greatest strength if you learn to use them together instead of against each other. Xyrath noticed something she hadn't before: subtle quantum fluctuations in the barrier between light and dark sections. The humans hadn't created a perfect separation at all. They'd created a controlled overlap, a tiny space where both states could exist simultaneously. And neither delegation had even noticed. "The human speaks wisdom," she said finally, her light pulses measured and clear. "We have fought for so long, we forgot to question why we fight." From the darkness, Null's vibrations carried a tone she'd never heard before. Uncertainty, perhaps even hope. The Dominion would be interested in seeing these technical proposals in more detail. Chen's smile broadened. "That's all we're asking for, a willingness to look at things differently. We've prepared detailed proposals for a phased integration program, starting with joint scientific ventures and gradually moving toward fuller cooperation." As the negotiations proceeded, Xyrath found herself repeatedly surprised by the human approach to diplomacy. Chen never tried to force agreement or demand concessions. Instead, he consistently found ways to turn points of conflict into opportunities for collaboration. When tensions rose, he would share stories of Earth's own history, tales of bitter enemies becoming steadfast allies, of cultures that seemed incompatible learning to thrive together. In her report to the collective's high radiance, Xyrath wrote, "The humans' greatest diplomatic skill isn't in their words or their technology. It's in their ability to imagine and believe in possibilities that other species would dismiss as impossible. They don't see our ancient conflict as an immovable reality. They see it as a puzzle waiting to be solved, a story waiting to be rewritten. And somehow, they make us see it that way too." The guardian species, Grand Arbiter Vexterra, stood before the assembled Galactic Council, her crystalline form pulsing with the gravity of the moment. The great chamber, with representatives from over 10,000 species, had never been so full. The motion before them was unprecedented: to formally recognize humanity as the guardian species of the galaxy. Less than a century ago, she began, her voice resonating through the chamber. "We watched with concern as humans made their first faster-than-light jump. Many thought they were too young, too unpredictable, too dangerous to join galactic society. Now, I stand before you to argue that they may be our greatest hope for the future." The holographic displays activated, showing scenes familiar to everyone present: the defeat of the Zoraxian fleet and humanity's subsequent sharing of their defensive technology, the resolution of the adaptive plague crisis through unprecedented collaborative research, the awakening of the quantum network under human guidance, the ongoing peace between the Eternal Light Collective and the Void Dominion. "But these visible achievements," Vexterra continued, "are not why I propose this recognition. Consider instead what these events reveal about human nature." New images appeared, hundreds of them, showing humans working alongside every known species in the galaxy. When faced with the Zoraxian threat, they didn't just defend themselves. They showed mercy to their defeated enemies and shared their innovations freely. When confronted with a biological weapon, they turned their own evolutionary weaknesses into a solution that saved billions. When our quantum network began to fail, they saw not a crisis but an opportunity for transformation. She paused, letting her next words carry special weight. Most remarkably, when they encountered a 12,000-year-old conflict that every other species had accepted as unchangeable, they found a way to turn antagonists into allies. The chamber filled with murmurs as representatives discussed among themselves. Vexterra raised her appendages for silence. "Some say humans are too young to bear such responsibility. I say their youth is their greatest strength. They have not yet learned what is impossible. They have not yet accepted the limitations that the rest of us take for granted." She gestured to Dr. Sarah Chen, Admiral Kithrax, and Ambassador Chen, who sat in the human section. "Their scientists don't just solve problems, they redefine them. Their warriors don't just fight, they protect. Their diplomats don't just negotiate, they reimagine what's possible. But most importantly, she continued, humans consistently demonstrate three qualities that make them unique among all known species. First, they instinctively protect not just their own kind, but any being they perceive as vulnerable. Second, they share their innovations freely, believing that knowledge belongs to everyone. And third, they never stop trying to improve, to solve, to help, even when everyone else has given up. The displays showed new images, human medical ships being the first to respond to natural disasters, human scientists freely sharing breakthroughs that could have made them enormously wealthy, human diplomats working tirelessly to resolve conflicts that predated their species' discovery of fire. We face unprecedented challenges, Vexterra declared. The galaxy is changing. The quantum network's awakening has opened possibilities we're only beginning to understand. The alliance between light and dark matter civilizations is reshaping our understanding of reality itself. In these transformative times, we need guardians who are not bound by traditional thinking. We need protectors who see opportunities where others see only threats. We need humans. She turned to address the human delegation directly. You have shown us that strength lies not in power, but in how that power is used. You have demonstrated that the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from turning them into friends. You have proven that the most valuable knowledge is not what we keep, but what we share. Returning her attention to the full council, she made her final argument. The role of guardian species is not just about protection. It's about inspiration. Humans inspire us not because they are perfect, but because they never stop trying to be better. They make mistakes, but they learn from them. They face failures, but they keep trying. They encounter the impossible, and they reimagine it into the possible. The question before us today is not whether humans deserve this recognition. The question is whether we are wise enough to formally acknowledge what they have already become through their actions. They are already guardians, not because we appointed them, but because that is who they are. The voting began. Representatives from across the galaxy registered their choices. When the final tally appeared, the result was clear, an overwhelming majority in favor. As the chamber erupted in a celebration that transcended species barriers, Admiral Cathrax approached Vexterra. You realize, the Admiral said, that most humans will feel overwhelmed by this responsibility. Vexterra's form shimmered with amusement. Of course, that's exactly why they're perfect for it. A species that doesn't feel the weight of such responsibility shouldn't bear it. But humans will spend every day trying to live up to it. They will never stop trying to be worthy of the trust we've placed in them. And that, she added, watching as human representatives were surrounded by well-wishers from 1,000 worlds, is exactly why they already are. In the years that followed, the term guardian species would come to mean much more than its original designation. It became synonymous with the unique human approach to galactic civilization, the belief that every problem has a solution, that every enemy can become a friend, that every crisis contains the seeds of opportunity, and that the greatest achievements come not from standing alone, but from bringing people together. The humans, true to their nature, accepted the honor with characteristic humility, and immediately began working to prove themselves worthy of it, not realizing that in doing so, they were proving exactly why they had been chosen in the first place.